Hello, it's Stuart here, and I've got some rather disturbing news on a religious story that happened in Kenya. Before that, I've opened up a poll, which is your favorite online atheist. So if you'd like to go and have a look at that in my channel and vote, in approximately 2 weeks, I'm going to compile the results and make a video on them. But just moving on, yes, so in Kenya, there's been a rather disturbing story that so far 90 bodies have been exhumed from a site. Body bags have been used. Police have been digging up an area and they've found 90 bodies fairly freshly buried. And the allegation is that this was part of a starvation Christian cult. There's a pastor, Pastor Paul Mackenzie, who has been taken into custody. And he's been charged. He's going to face charges. They tried to revive some of those that were exhumed. Some of them were found to have signs of life. They tried to revive them, but they were all dead. So, what's behind this? So this Pastor Paul Mackenzie, from what I can gather from the news stories that I've read, he was a taxi driver in Kenya. He was described as a good, clean living person. And apparently one day he disappeared. He vanished for a year. And he returned a born-again Christian with significant knowledge of the Bible and also the Quran. He founded a church, the Good News International Church. So he was a charismatic preacher, very persuasive it seems, and was able to interpret the Bible, compare it with the Quran, and apparently people were very impressed with his knowledge and with his abilities, to the extent that they would more or less do whatever he instructed them to do. Now he's been arrested on this charge. He's been arrested on charges. He has denied that he instructed anybody to starve themselves to death. And he's got videos online. They can't find any evidence in the videos where he's instructing people to starve themselves to death, but there are people who knew roughly what was going on in the cult and that he was very coercive, and that people just believed him. People believed in the end times that he was prophesying, and his prophecy is that the world is going to come to an end in June 2023. And from what I can gather, people were starving themselves to death, children as well. Parents were starving the children, and they've found so far about 90 bodies. Families, mothers, children. There's been a lot of grief over this, obviously. A lot of very upset people who are blaming the authorities. It seems that he was actually arrested previously for, well, 2 people were found dead. 2 children were found dead, and it was found that they had starved to death. The police arrested him. He was not charged, and he was released because of lack of evidence. They couldn't find any evidence that he had anything to do with these children who'd starved. So the authorities are being blamed because they feel that they had warnings about what he was up to, and they had this case, and they did not take any action to close his church down. 90 people are dead so far. And obviously, I'm an atheist, and it gives me no pleasure at all to report on these tragedies. I've reported on 2 previous tragedies that had, one was Jehovah's Witnesses, and another was a Christian story. But in both of those cases, there were shooters, disgruntled ex-members of a community, Christian communities, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the other one in America. They'd gone into, one was a church and one was a school, and they'd gone in and taken out their anger and their grievances on members of that community and killed many people. Now, I suppose that you can't really say that it was any Christian belief in itself that led to this, but for the Kenya case and Pastor Paul Mackenzie, he has been preaching end times for June 2023. People believed him. We know that in Christian theology, we've got eschatologists who study the end times, the end of the world. And this is something that Christians believe in almost universally, that the end times, that Jesus will float down on a cloud. They've been waiting for this for the last 2,000 years since Jesus died. They expected it shortly, not too long after the death of Jesus, within the lifetimes of the apostles. This was expected. Christians are still expecting the end times, where every single person will be judged, and obviously sent one way or another, depending on whether they accept Jesus as the Savior or not. So this is a direct result of Christian belief, in my opinion. It's not that there are people with personality disorders who have maybe failed in life or have been scarred by some traumatic, maybe victimization within a church, and come back and taken revenge. That could happen in any, kind of environment, any secular environment. So you can't specifically blame religious belief for that, or you can't specifically blame Christianity for that. It's more about the community and the nature of those communities and the personalities, etc. But in this particular case, it seems that we have a theological reason why people would starve themselves to death, why they would believe in these end times, that a charismatic preacher could convince people that this was the case, in the same way that David Koresh convinced the Branch Davidians that he was the second coming, and that they had nothing to fear by sacrificing themselves, because they had a lifetime, or rather they had an eternity in paradise to look forward to. Another occasion when a specific Christian belief led to a tragedy. Now this brings me to another point. We've got here a tragedy of really significant proportions that happened in Kenya. We're talking about 90 people dead, a lot of them children. Waco, I believe that about 130 died, and a lot of those were children as well. What really makes me angry here is the parents who are putting their children through this. It's crazy. But just to come back to my point, when Waco was happening, and in the wake of Waco, if you'll forgive the pun, we had blanket coverage of David Koresh and everything. It was on CNN, it was on BBC, Sky News, the whole lot. It was everywhere for days and days and days. Now this is just a story in Kenya. A similar number of people have died, and really there's just one page. I can tell you there's not really too much happening in the news about this, and it will vanish from the news in a very short space of time. Why? What is the difference between 90 dead black Kenyans and 130 odd many middle-class white Americans? Why the disparity in coverage? Okay, I know I've answered that question, but I don't like to see that kind of obvious prejudice and disparity. There should be a lot more coverage on this particular story, particularly because in America, if more Christians see where their beliefs can lead, it might actually give them second thoughts about subscribing to these dangerous beliefs and doctrines. Okay, well that's all for now. Thank you for watching. It's not nice to report on something like this, but I think that we need to actually get it out there and counter the claim that Christianity is harmless. No, Christianity is not harmless. It's not harmless at all. We've seen plenty of cases like this. We've seen Andrea Yates. We've seen the Jonestown massacre. We've seen Waco. I only reported on this case in Kenya. I did some more reading into it. There are more cases in Kenya which have got fewer figures, where people are dying and disappearing in Christian communities. So this has only been reported on simply because of the number of people dead, but there's a lot of it happening, particularly in Africa and other third world countries, where people are desperate, in poverty, and they need hope. They see Christianity as giving them hope, but I'm afraid in this story it only brought them to an early death. Okay, thanks for watching. Be back again soon. Bye for now.